a space to speak your mind with Cornwall Mind.
Welcome to A Space to Speak Your Mind.
A radio programme and a podcast about mental health and wellbeing made by people with lived experience as part of a wellbeing group run by Cornwall Mind.
We do occasionally cover subjects that some listeners may find distressing.
For more information, help and support, please visit cornwallmind.org.
I'm Gaelle.
I'm Richard, and alongside Abi,
we're presenting this month's show.
First though, we're welcoming Gaelle back to the show. So Gaelle, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
What's been going on in your life?
I've just recovered from half term, which was such a busy week. Any kind of appointment and work I could have, I had it all crammed in 1 week. And I only spent 1 day with my daughter. And I finished the week absolutely exhausted and quite cranky, to be honest. And this week it's coming to a nicer quality of life. And already I'm feeling so much better for it. I think it's all about sometimes realising how much we cram in and how much we should put into our diaries, and sometimes to just say, no, it's too much. No, I don't want to do it. And I think that's what I started to do last week.
There's so many expectations, aren't there? And I think around half term we have so much to cram in, but it's that thing, isn't it, about getting exhausted and putting boundaries down. And if we just can't do something, we have to say we can't do it.
Yeah, I think the complication with me at the moment is I've taken some work, which is 3 days a week. But I found that because I'm working some weekends, not always the whole weekend, but part of a weekend, I am not taking the day off during the week because it's like a normal day. I still have to wake up to get my daughter out of bed to take the bus to go to school, that kind of thing. So even though I'm not doing the school run like I was doing a few years back, I'm still on mummy's call. You know, it's mummy's duty. And it's just when you have had lifetime off, knowing that the weekend is for resting, and then you start working then, and then you had agreed to do certain things, which in my case happen every fourth Tuesday of a month, it all fell into that week. And it wasn't bad planning. I think it's just got on the top of me because emotionally it also got on the top of me on that level as well. And I think I needed to put a lot of self-care in place and to be able to say, I'm not on standby for you. I'm here 3 days a week, but that's it. And I enjoy the work, but it's a challenging environment. It's emotionally quite draining because I have one-to-ones with people. I unlock doors into who they are, their personality, their likes and dislikes, and then I plan activities around that. And I want it to be meaningful. I want everything I do to be meaningful. And I come back home and there's nothing left in me. So I think you have to realise what you can do and for how long you can do it, what is healthy. And I think there's a tendency in employment these days to have, if you're willing to do it, then they will ask for more constantly. And the more you give, the more they take. And that's fine because sometimes they're short of staff and all of that stuff. But equally, there is a point where I have gone through periods of burnout before because I've taken on too much, or sometimes because I wanted to escape something that I didn't enjoy, which I had to do. I kept going until I just completely collapsed. And I think that's probably why I do all the things that I do with the people now. That is about protecting them from that. But the more I do that with people, the more I'm actually reminding myself of I have to do it for myself as well.
It's interesting when we look at our own mental health and well-being. I think as practitioners, we're giving advice to people, we're instilling the 5 ways to well-being, but sometimes, and I find this, that I have to keep checking in on myself and making sure that I'm doing the right things, because very much like you, I've taken on a lot more recently. I've set myself some new challenges. I've done some things that are very scary for me because they're going back to things that are from the past that maybe didn't work out quite so well or I had to take a pause from. So I'm doing new things and a different way of doing things, and part of that is taking on a lot and learning a lot very, very quickly. And just like yourself, I've had periods of burnout before, which has really affected my well-being, periods of chronic fatigue in my youth. I just really don't want to go back to that place. So I'm doing things, as we talk about on the show today, around mindfulness. I'm looking after myself as far as diet. Sleep is a really big one. It's not always possible, but as much as I can, I'm trying to get good quality sleep. And exercise is my biggest one, because that's something I never used to do. But being active and doing the things that I enjoy, that really helps me.
I think it's important to find windows of time where you do something that you like that are not attached to any guilt. Because I think there's this thing that has been around for quite a long time, and I think probably worse since we've got social media. We've got all these influencers and having goals and having bucket lists and tick boxes and all of that. That comes with a lot of pressure of constantly doing something. And when we stop, we feel like we should be doing something, that we should fill our time with doing an activity, whatever it is. And right now I'm just stepping away from that. I'm surrounded by things that I have an interest in. So I have been to Japan recently, and I've actually decided to watch lots of programs, film series that give me more knowledge about the country, because I want to go back and I want to get to know it more. But I've also started using a platform that has got no advert. And the beauty of that, because when I came back from the trip, seeing all the adverts, the news, the interruptions, the previews of different programs really, really got to me. And also the amount of stuff that is really dark out there. I mean, the amount of crime programs on TV, and the fact that we have no realization of how this could impact people, and especially if we're feeling a bit low, that makes us feel more unsafe, I think. So when I started watching this on a platform that has no adverts whatsoever, including previews of other things that constantly interrupt or attention span, I think that made a big difference. And this morning I didn't have to do anything before I had to come here, and that felt very luxurious, because I watched a couple of episodes and then I started to do some artwork, had lunch, and I came here leisurely. That feels like that's almost a day off, and even being here is part of my self-care. So I'm enjoying that more, and I'm realising that my well-being has improved a lot since I've started doing that.
I think it's so important that we look at ourselves and the way that we're doing things, and a big takeaway from what you've just said there is coming away from negative things. And I'm a news junkie. I used to watch the news constantly, but there's so much going on that we have no control over, and all it's doing is increasing our anxiety. And I'm purposely now distancing myself from some of the stories so that I don't get affected. Stories that are more powerful and the stories that are negative are the ones that trick our brain into keeping watching, unfortunately. And one other thing I'd like to touch on is you were talking there earlier about ourselves and how much we take on. I've recently found through the conversations we've had on this show that I have aspects of neurodivergence around ADHD and autism, which I never knew before, but it's giving me a new way of looking at things. And I think one of the things that I've found really is that I do take on quite a lot, because I take on things during those periods where I am wanting to do everything all at once. I say yes to everything, and then I do have that other side of the ADHD where I get the brain fog, I get exhaustion, I'm not able to concentrate, and even to the point where one day I could be all guns blazing, recording things for the show, doing some extra bits that I've got to do, and another day I could be sitting in front of a screen and I just cannot think, I cannot concentrate.
I have met, through my work of delivering mindfulness courses and art for wellbeing, I've met quite a lot of people with some neurodivergency, some mental health, some burnout, you name it, chronic fatigue, chronic pain. And I'm finding that there is our generation that is getting diagnosed quite late. Now the kids get diagnosed at school, that involves quite a lot of energy from the parents, very often fighting the system for a few years. But I find that when we start having a reason why we struggled that much, and actually that is taking away the, oh, but I was rubbish at school. No, I wasn't. It's just that I didn't fit the system, or the system didn't fit me, and there's an awful lot of it that was not relevant to me. So I think people get empowered when they get diagnosed, or even if they think they are, whatever it is, and just for knowing that there's a reason for it, why they don't quite feel like they belong or they can function like everyone else, they start looking for resources. And the more people talk about it, the more there are resources, the more there are people coming out with, I'm an ADHD, autistic, I'm this and that. And I find it's lovely. The downside of that is if you are on social media and the algorithms pick on that, then your feed is full of just that. And I think it's quite difficult to just sit there when you realise that this is happening, because a platform that I used to enjoy, which had a lot of still pictures before, there was very little music unless if there were musicians. Now everything's a video, everything's got movement, everything's got flashing images, and everything's got music, and it's loud. And then you have the adverts for the things you started showing interest in, and all you need is one click and that's it, you've had it. Your feed will be full of that. You're there to kind of relax and take a breather from all of that, and then suddenly something that was quite a safe space is no longer that safe space.
And I think the other thing is that when you're saying about having a diagnosis, I think it can be helpful for people, and I think that there's reasons why people might want to do it, but I think just having that knowledge for me, because it's just made me look at things differently, and I don't feel I need a diagnosis, but to see all those key points and know that I can relate to them means that I can now adjust what I do, and it doesn't affect anybody else. I can obviously tell people if it's a situation that I'm finding difficult for those reasons, and that I can give it context. But I think there's a lot that's being said about a lot of people are being diagnosed, or ADHD and autism and things like that. People are being diagnosed. It's just a good thing to have your own personal knowledge and to be able to have that empowerment that you can act accordingly.
I think the criticism of there's so many people being diagnosed, everyone's ADHD these days. Let's put it out there. It's what some people say. And very often it comes from people that are uneducated about it. Also, it comes with people with little empathy. It comes from people that don't try to put themselves into other people's shoes, to try to see it from a different angle, a different perspective. And I think it's a good thing. But because it's pushed out so much, I think it distorts probably how many people are. But I think it's empowering. I think the day that you start having names for different facets of your personality, that day is a big boost for your self-esteem, for your confidence, for the fact that it does acknowledge the difficulties that you've had. And it comes with a door to some solutions, a door to hope that things can get better, and that actually you can control things better around you once you know. So I think knowledge is power, and I think it's a big key for self-esteem and confidence.
So let's talk about what's happening on the show today. We're going to hear from Em and Kieran from Land's End, who along with some friends are embarking on a challenge in a decrepit but dependable Peugeot 106, and also Joe on a Herald Classic 250 motorbike. They're going to the farthest edge of Kazakhstan to raise money for Cornwall Mind.
And I will be talking to Abi about mindfulness.
And in our continuing theme around addiction, I'm talking to Karen Tyrell from Drinkaware for Mental Health Awareness Week that took place recently.
A space to speak your mind with Cornwall Mind. This is A Space to Speak Your Mind, and it's Richard and Gaelle this month. And we're just talking about having conversations. It's something really important, and we're going to touch on in a moment around men's mental health and the fact that men tend to not necessarily have conversations in the same way that women do. I'm just wondering what your perspective is around having conversations with friends, Gaelle.
I agree with the fact that men don't socialise as much as women. We seem to just do it. We do it on the playground. We do it from baby groups. We take the dog for a walk and we meet people and we chat there. We don't chat with anyone. to be honest. What I'm finding though is that when your life is quite full and you manage to find a slot to meet a friend that is really busy and you're really busy, and they tend to be catch-up conversations, and I don't find them especially useful, because by the end of talking about that stuff that you are moving through, it's quite hard to actually get yourself by the end of it out of that state, because you've put yourself back in that conversation. And I'm just dreaming of conversations where you talk about your dreams and light stuff, things that may sound a bit random, or something about new things you would like to try, or something completely different. Because I think every time you do something different, there's something fresh about it, there's something new. But it's very, very hard with people that care about you to steer the topics of conversation away from the life we have, life at home, relationships, work, struggles, health, whatever. It's very, very hard to move that forward or sideways. And I think some people just, because they haven't got anyone to talk to, I have an ability to listen. And I just find that people unload onto me. And one of the results of that is then I'm just then carrying that with me on the top of my own stuff. And that can be quite heavy. But there's nothing I can do about it, because it's one of my skills and I'm an empath. So that means I've got empathy in buckets. And it just happens naturally. But I think there's a space to develop conversations that are taking us out of the normal habits that we have, the things that we always talk about. Because if we've done it for a very long time and it hasn't served us then, it's still not serving us now.
And I think, as we're going to hear in just a moment with Karen Tyrell from Drinkaware, that men find having conversations very, very difficult, and they're resorting to using alcohol as a stimulant to open up. So let's have a listen now to Karen Tyrell as we welcome her to the show.
A space to speak your mind with Cornwall Mind.
The charity Drinkaware and Angie's Man Club have teamed up for Mental Health Awareness Week, as over half of middle-aged men say that drinking is often used as a coping mechanism, while 1 in 5 find it difficult to open up without an alcoholic drink. Karen Tyrell is the CEO of Drinkaware, and she's here to tell me more. So thanks for being here, Karen.
No problem at all.
What else did you find from the survey?
So one of the things that we really wanted to draw attention to this Mental Health Awareness Week is that alcohol and mental health can often be quite closely intertwined. And I guess for us, it is about recognising that that can happen to anyone at any time in their lives. But actually, men in their middle years, so 45 to 64, are often finding that those around them are perhaps drinking to cope. And what we are encouraging people to do is to open up a conversation about alcohol and the part it plays in your life, and to just spend a bit of time talking about drinking and how that affects you with your friends and families and loved ones.
So what are the reasons that men are saying that they're not having conversations around drinking and also around mental health?
Well, there's a huge array of reasons, aren't there, why men perhaps don't feel as comfortable as women do talking about their feelings. There's lots of cultural reasons and expectations that men think people have of them and the part that they play in the family, those sorts of things. And men traditionally aren't quite as good at seeking help and support for themselves as women are either. So there's a lot of reasons. We don't fully know. I think scientists don't fully know why men aren't quite as good at opening up as women are. What I'm seeing, and I think what people across the country have seen in recent years, is that people are moving to a space where they're a bit more willing to talk about their mental health in different spaces and at different times than they used to be 10 or 15 years ago. But actually, we think there could be more to be done to open up those conversations when it's about your relationship with alcohol and how that impacts on your mental health as well, because it tends to not really have the same level of discussion as perhaps mental health is in the workplace, for example.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because we want to encourage men to talk more. And I think for some, being in an atmosphere, maybe in a pub or somewhere where they've got a drink, they use that almost as a false security to allow them to have a conversation, but maybe being unaware that there are negative effects by having alcohol to their mental health.
That's exactly right. So alcohol can impact on your mental health, or your mental health can impact on how how much alcohol you're drinking. And it really depends on the situation that you're in at the time. So we certainly find that sometimes the pressures that life puts upon us, people sometimes can feel that drinking to kind of put your troubles out of your mind for the evening, that can feel like a good plan at the time. Unfortunately, there are knock-on consequences of that because alcohol is a depressant, and it can impact in the short term on things like your general mood. It can impact the quality of the sleep that you are having, and those sorts of things in the short term can make quite a big difference as to how you are feeling in terms of your mental health.
So what ways can men have conversations that don't involve having alcohol? And I know you've teamed up with Andy's Man Club. Is that one way that people can get involved?
Yes, exactly. So Andy's Man Club are a really great charity. They offer peer-to-peer support groups all across the country, and they tend to do that on a Monday evening. So it's a space where men can talk to other men. There aren't professionals there. It's a cup of tea and a chat. It's very much self-led, and that can be a really good space to open up, perhaps sometimes to people you've never met before. And that's, for some people, that's actually easier than talking to people who care very deeply for them. So that's one way of doing it. Of course, there are a lot of other mental health supports out there. So Mind, Samaritans, those sorts of places. I think the other thing we would be saying is trust your family and friends and potentially open up the beginnings of a conversation. So have a little look at your drinking. Think to yourself and talk to your friends and family about what are the reasons you're drinking. Is it because you're having a lovely time and you're socializing? Are you celebrating something? Or are you drinking because life's got a bit on top of you and things are more stressful than perhaps they've been at other points in life? So sometimes checking how much you're drinking can be a good way forward. We have a quick check that you can do on our website called the Drinking Check. It's a bit like an MOT. It's 5 minutes, quick quiz, and it asks you a few questions about how much you're drinking, and we can help work out whether you're at increased risk of harm.
And also, if someone is worried about someone in their family, is that a good place that they can start as well?
Yeah, we've got lots of information on the Drinkaware website, which is drinkaware.co.uk. And again, you can fill that quick assessment in on behalf of somebody that you know and care about and get a bit of an indication about whether there are, in fact, things that you should be worrying about or things that you could be doing to help and support. And we've got hints and tips about how to start the conversation with people if you need to as well.
So people can find out more if they go to the Drinkaware website. That's Karen Tyrell, who is the CEO of Drinkaware. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
A space to speak your mind with Cornwall Mind.
So thanks again to Karen for joining us here on the show. What did you think about what Karen had to say there, Gaelle?
That's really interesting. I've heard this kind of thing before. This is more the kind of solution of, how much are you drinking? What kind of solutions are you going to put in place? What kind of support you can get? I have a slightly different angle to it because I think that the way that media and what surrounds us is not being mentioned, and it's very conducive to people engaging in behaviours that can slide further down the road. Awareness of what you're sensitive to can help in changing tiny habits and then in time regaining control or even not losing control. So I think, for example, the way that alcohol is presented in series and films, that has changed over time. I mean, in the last 10-15 years, I have lost count of series and films that present very stressed characters that will reach for a bottle and a very large glass because the size of the glasses around us has gone up. They don't do small glasses anymore. It's pretty much impossible to find. I have tried. So anyway, they grab a bottle of wine or the beer or whatever and the glass, and then they say, oh my god, this was a hard day and whatever. And this kind of scene is now becoming almost a classic scene of how people unwind, and it's almost suggesting that that's a way to do it, and then that's been normalized. Now, another thing that has changed is in my working life at the beginning there were the Christmas parties and the Friday night at the pub and socially meeting at the end of a week to celebrate that week, and that's happening less and less. I think people are just so totally exhausted by the time they reach their home that I find people are not socially spending as much time with each other as before. I find it that I've worked in different industries and it's very, very hard to make friends in whatever work that you do these days because people are not meeting for dinner, they're not meeting for drinks, they don't have a time, they have to rush to their kids and so on. So that means that if the drinks with other people have become less, the drinking alone at home is happening more. And I think these things don't get mentioned. So if that is happening to you, if you notice that you're sensitive to scenes on films, just make a mental note of they're pushing that on people. They are normalizing it. They make it sound like this is okay. But the problem is if you are feeling quite low and that's not what you need to see, because that's not a healthy example to show to people, I think that becomes part of the solution of saying, write down these things on a piece of paper, the back of an envelope if that's what it takes. But just write down the things that you see, that you notice the buy one, get one free. If you buy 6 bottles, you get 20%, so they're getting you to buy more. Normalizing drinking at home on your own, it just, when it gets too hard, just reach for a bottle. All of these things is their way of cutting down on some of them, and so that is not pushed on you.
What I find is the biggest point is changing habits. I think once we can get into a change of habit, and it does take, I think they say it takes at least 30 days, but 3 months I think is more the standard of changing a habit. I think that's a real big one. And you were talking before, and we're going to introduce Abi into the studio in just a moment, around mindfulness. And that was a big one for me in the last 12 months, that I used mindfulness techniques. And that has really, really helped me. So let's introduce Abi into the studio, and she's going to be chatting now with you, Gaelle, about mindfulness.
A space to speak your mind with Cornwall Mind.
I'm Abi, and today in the studio we're welcoming Gaelle back to the show. Hello, Gaelle.
Hi.
Gaelle, could you just remind us what it is that you do?
Okay, so I run mindfulness courses, very, very practical ways of coping with life in general, and art for well-being. And I am now a mind volunteer as well.
So just to start at the beginning, what would you say mindfulness is?
Mindfulness is a way of being in the present. It's tapping into the senses, it's tapping into skills that if we are not taught, it would be very hard to do. Now, in the late 80s, I think, someone called John Kabat-Zinn in the US was working in a hospital, and many people were suffering from chronic pain, and they tried everything. They tried physio, they tried painkillers, all sorts, and they were still suffering with pain. So he said, give me them and I will try something new on them. And he brought in mindfulness from Asia, and he started doing meditation and other things like breathing and the 5 senses, that kind of thing. And he found that there was a level of reduction in anxiety, stress, depression, and coping with the pain itself. And suddenly, it's not that the pain had disappeared, but they had built their resilience in coping with the pain. And the thoughts that went with the repetitiveness of it and the disruptiveness of it.
So what mindfulness techniques can we use to help us deal with stress?
So before I answer that, I need to talk about the pillars of mindfulness. You have a few that John Kabat-Zinn came up with, and they had names like non-judging, patience, beginner's mind, trust, non-striving, acceptance, letting go, and gratitude. So basically, you're not going to apply all of them in one go, but you will, for example, apply the beginner's mind is going into a new situation with how you would approach it if you were a young child and you just embraced it and you go with whatever the outcome is. So embracing your beginner's mind means that you let go of maybe the anticipation of the results. Maybe you expect too much of what you can achieve in one go, putting the pressure on yourself. And when you apply that, you are being in the moment, you're not judging yourself, and then you will start being more patient with yourself, and you will learn to trust the situation a little bit more. So basically what he's done is, by having these pillars, is he has created ways of defining what we can do in every situation in terms of how we handle a situation and how we feel about it, how we handle it, how we stop overthinking it. So when you ask what kind of techniques we can use, there's plenty. So there are some where you simply tune into your breath, because the breath is with you 24/7, every day of your life. If you're not breathing, you're not alive. So by reconnecting with your breath, you're disconnecting from everything else on a sensory level around you. And it means that it matters less. So just by tuning into the breath, it will mean that you regain a bit of control over the situation, or you just taking a little break from it, just until you recompose yourself and your emotions and you feel strong enough to deal with it. You can also tap into your senses. So for example, you go outdoors and you do exercise of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can touch, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. Now, some of them can be a bit tricky if, for example, you don't have anything to taste to hand. So it could be just the taste of your saliva, or it could be just you have the taste of a coffee you had half an hour ago, or it could be a blackberry if you go on a walk and then you just pick a blackberry if it's the season. Please don't pick anything that you don't know what it is, because obviously you want to be safe. In terms of touch, it could be that it's some really soft leaves in nature. So some of them are quite prickly, some of them are soft. But if you don't have that to hand, it could be the texture of the clothing you have on you, and it could be touching your hair, or it could be touching the desk you have in front of you. So that's another technique. But there's so many, and I think it's just taking one at a time that allows you to be in that zone where you're either with the breathing or the senses.
So that's a great exercise to try when you're out and about, but how can we apply these mindfulness techniques in our day-to-day life?
Okay, so let's say that you are at work and you've had a difficult conversation with your manager and you need to just kind of take a breather. Now, if you look in the room around you, you will find a window or a door or just the outline of a wall opposite you. And you will start from one corner of that window, that wall, or that door, and you breathe in to the next corner. Breathe out, down to the next corner. Breathe in, breathe out, and you do that for a few breaths. Now, all that is moving are your eyes. No one knows you're doing this, but whilst you're doing this, you're regaining composure, and you've tapped into the breath. So that's a very, very practical way of doing it. You can take a few deep breaths before you take the driving wheel, after maybe having had some bad news or feeling frustrated after a conversation you didn't like. There are lots of ways where you can take a pause for yourself, and you take that moment to think, I don't have to go straight away. I can just take a couple of minutes and then take that for myself. And by the time you do that, you feel a little bit stronger.
Oh, that's great, because that's things that we can apply really easily. And as you say, without other people around us even knowing that we're doing it. So
yeah.
I think that could be really helpful.
I think that a lot of the conception of people about mindfulness is that you have to sit on a cushion and you have to meditate. And when we had this conversation earlier that the listeners won't know about, we talked about people being very self-aware of doing things. I said, well, I can run mindfulness course without meditating, because actually the pillars of mindfulness, you can apply them to lots of little different tasks. So if I was to do a drawing exercise with doing repetitive lines within a certain set of parameters, I am taking people from the left brain to the right brain, where the emotions are, the feelings, the senses live on the right. But the self-criticism, the inner critic, the autopilot, that lives on the left side of the brain. So if you have criticism in your head, it's all connected to words and numbers. It's all the language center. That's on the left. So if I take you into something that is quite repetitive, that will calm the nervous system down, and then people don't realize that what I've actually done is I've given them a breather, and by the end of it they're a lot calmer. So I can have a room that starts with lots of conversations, and some of them can be heightened by certain situations. And then the calm descends on the room, and by the end of it, it's like, wow, I feel completely different. So there are lots of ways of applying mindfulness, and for me, I'm more interested into, okay, I need a one-on-one now. I need a solution now. What can you do for me? And no, I don't have a cushion to sit on. And no, I don't have 15 minutes right now to do it. What can I do? And a lot of the techniques that I use or teach are very, very simple things that people can do anywhere. And they're not visible.
And presumably they can also become habits that we can add in throughout our day.
Yeah, I think there is breaking that first time. You know, when you do anything for the first time, our brain is wired for doing habits. It knows what it wants to do. It's done it before. It's very easy. And 95% of your decisions every day are made by your brain on automatic pilot. And this is a survival mode. This is how your brain has been designed, because it doesn't have a power to make every single decision every day. We make thousands of decisions every day. So if it knows your favorite type of ice cream or cereals when you go shopping, you have pre-decided already what brand you like and discarded the others because you've tried them and you don't like them. Your brain will know that. So not thinking about it. But then the first time is always harder, because you have to overcome the brain that will try to go down the path where it always goes. And if you have been handling stress in ways that haven't been very helpful, your brain doesn't care. It's a habit. It's comfortable for the brain. Not for you, but it doesn't care. But it thinks it's doing a good job, and it thinks it's protecting you. So creating new habits means that at the beginning you have to push through that resistance. And then yes, you will build the new habits, but you will need some repetition. One last thing I would say is you need to choose techniques that you can relate to, things that feel natural to you. If you force it, you will have even more resistance to go over. But if you think, oh, that was really nice, then tap into these first, get comfortable with that, and then add some more difficult ones after. Don't feel you have to climb a wall just because you are making new habits. Don't make it too hard on yourself. Be gentle.
I think that's a perfect point to wrap this up. Thank you so much, Gaelle. That's been really interesting.
My pleasure.
A space to speak your mind with Cornwall Mind.
This is A Space to Speak Your Mind with Richard and Gaelle. So really interesting what you were talking to Abi about there, Gaelle, because I find mindfulness really empowering. It's something that I never did in the past, but now I have podcasts and I have audiobooks, and I find it so beneficial, especially around evening times, because as we mentioned earlier on the show, I do have ADHD and my mind can be whirring all the time. To just get myself down into that level where I can be mindful and I can be present and put myself in a space, whether it be in the daytime or, as I say, in the evening, where I can feel more relaxed and get myself ready to be in a pattern ready for sleep.
Mindfulness gives a lot of power. There's a lot of learning in it. There's lots of little nuggets. And if you do guided meditation, which is the one I recommend, there's always a little technique or a nugget about how things work, how the brain is wired, how our motivation works, how things happen to us. And when you start having that knowledge, it gives you an idea of how things work, how we are affected by it. And I think we can step away from having this notion that it's all down to willpower to make changes, because if the brain lacks its own comfort zone, and anything that is a repeat pattern, it doesn't have to use energy to work on. Every time that you want to change a habit, the difficulty is the brain is working against you because it doesn't like change. It is absolutely petrified of change. And I find that if you ask people to work on willpower only, it's so much harder. For some people, it would be impossible. So I would say give mindfulness a go and have a try. There are some wonderful apps like Headspace and Calm out there, and many free ones. And all that little learning that you get, it's funny how these things stay with you. And once they're stuck in your head, they become an explanation for things you couldn't explain before. They become motivation.
Yeah, I think it's a journey, and it's one that I'm embarking on. And I think the more I get into it, the more it becomes part of my second nature, that I can experience mindfulness. And as I say, I am getting so much from it. Now we're going to hear from Em and Kieran from Land's End, who, along with some friends, are embarking on a challenge in a decrepit but dependable Peugeot 106, alongside Joe, who's on a Herald Classic 250 motorbike, to the farthest edge of Kazakhstan to raise money for Cornwall Mind.
A space to speak your mind.
Welcome to the show, Em, Kieran and Matt. First, can you tell me more about this epic trip?
Yeah, sure. So the first thing to say is that we're obviously driving from Cornwall to Kazakhstan. We're doing it as part of the Mongol Rally, which is a kind of pre-existing annual tradition, very much an unsupported journey that starts in Prague and people from all over the world join. And then traditionally it's ended in Mongolia, but obviously more recently in Kazakhstan, so that we don't have to go through Russia, basically. So we are putting our own spin on it and going from, as you say, from Land's End to where the Stands End. All of us have sort of roots in Cornwall. We met all studying at Falmouth at uni and then have sort of gone from there, really.
So what's inspired you to do this? I wonder if, Matt, you want to come in here.
It's kind of, in a way, a send-off to the car. It's my first car, which is called Davina, and I've had her for about 5 or 6 years. And as you know, being down in Cornwall, vehicles of a certain age start to sort of melt away with the Cornish sea air and rust. So it's not really going to last much longer. And I thought, what better thing to do than do like an epic road trip in it to kind of send it off. And the Mongol Rally's been on my radar for a few years, and I've just always wanted to do it, I think. It just seems like the pinnacle of road trip and adventure. And
you are doing this for charity. Tell me about that story.
We're supporting 3 different charities, one of them obviously being Cornwall Mind. Mental health is a cause that is particularly close to our hearts, but also our communities in Cornwall. So what we love about Cornwall Mind is that all the donations stay in the county, which is quite cool and unique to a charity structure as well. So it's nice for us to see things happening in our local areas. Kieran and I live together just in Redruth. Joe's actually just moved to St Stephen near St Austell, and then Matt lived with us for many years and then has recently gone over the border to Devon, which is boo from us. But obviously still very much a part of Cornwall life and the various communities here. And our other charities, Cool Earth is one of them. They're based actually locally in Penryn, which is an amazing coincidence because Cool Earth is the sort of Mongol Rally official sponsor. And they do really great work protecting rainforests, but they also support Indigenous people with climate solutions and help to innovate on that front. And then finally, we have chosen Copperfield as well, which was actually set up by 2 Cornish twins, Chris and Maren Helenga, after Chris was diagnosed with incurable breast cancer when she was 23. So they're now a sort of national charity, but Copperfield helps to do a lot of work raising awareness and encouraging young people to check their chests regularly, no matter what gender they are, and basically just catch signs of breast cancer early. And that's also a cause that is quite close to our hearts.
Yeah, I suppose personally the charity that I wanted to get on board was Mind, just because my struggles with anxiety and depression is just one of those things that not many people sort of speak up about, and I personally tend to kind of hide it or not speak so openly about it, but it's so important to me nowadays to prioritize my mental health. And being down here in Cornwall, that's, I would say, is quite easy to do because of sort of the access to the ocean and all the hobbies that I find just inspiring and keeps my sort of mental health in check.
We've all had our own, I guess, battles with mental health, and particularly me, my family has had varying levels of kind of struggles with mental health. So it's something that's very close to us. And I think, as you mentioned, especially down in Cornwall, we've all lived in Cornwall and we know what it can be like. You know, there's quite harsh winters and it can be quite depressing. So it's a cause we really wanted to get behind and support as much as we could with our trip.
What support have you had ahead of the challenge?
Ever since we put the video out, we've had an incredible amount of support. The immediate support that we've had is some sort of close friends and families and businesses down here in Cornwall. The first being my company, A-Side Studio, they're a design studio based down here. We've also got Kingdom and Sparrow, Financial Planning Concepts, Land's End Coffee Roastery, which we had to get someone on board that was based down here and could sort of see the send-off as best as we could. And we visit their cafe regularly and they're just incredible people, so it's nice to have them on board. We've also got Decathlon, Ocean Bottle, Sherpa Power, Pelly Case, and a few more incredible people
What's the challenges going to be along the way?
The main challenges will be, I suppose, the car staying in one piece, and then obviously our route, trying to figure out how to navigate all these different countries and borders. And I suppose just finding a place to stay every night as well, finding spots to camp. I mean, there's going to be a million different obstacles on our way, but it's part of the fun, really, isn't it? It's just what makes it an adventure, having all these kind of obstacles to overcome.
We will be trying to do it on a bit of a budget as well. So quite a lot of people do the Mongol Rally in various levels of comfort, I guess. So, people do it and stay in guest houses and Airbnbs along the way. As Matt said, we are going to try and be wild camping and thinking on our feet as much as we can along the way, mostly just because we think that will be more of an adventure and to get us out of our comfort zones a little bit. But the visas so far have been a bit of a challenge as well. So even though his voice is completely lost, massive shout out to Joe, who's been prioritising and like doing all of the logistics on that.
A massive shout out to Joe, because he's the only one of us that has any mechanical knowledge. So we're kind of relying on him when we're out there to keep the car going.
Yeah, just to explain, Joe is on the call, but at the moment his voice is wavering, to say the least. So we're going to give him the benefits of just listening in. But yeah, we want him back up to full speed for when the challenge starts. And Joe's going to be alongside you on a Herald Classic 250 motorbike. Why has he chosen that?
Good question. I think it was primarily so that he could keep up with the car. We did have to dissuade him from coming on a monkey bike. I don't know if you've seen those, but they are like tiny little, essentially kids' bikes that are like 50cc. So definitely we're very glad that he's on a bike that will have the capacity to keep up with us. And I went with him to Plymouth to buy it, and we managed to drive it back. The tyre pressure was about 4 psi when we pulled into the garage, but it's in pretty good nick now. So hopefully it's going to stay that way.
And after it's all over, there's a film in the works too. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so there is. We'll be filming the entire trip and trying to condense a month's worth of travel into one 45-minute to an hour film that we'll then put on YouTube and into film festivals and stuff. So yeah, that's going to be a challenge in itself, is trying to film everything possible while we're out there. But it's going to be a lot of fun, and it's going to be really nice to look back on it once we're back here in the UK. One of the big reasons we want to do it is so that we can share the experience with other people, I guess. So other people can come along with us on the journey. And obviously not everyone has the privilege to do a trip of this magnitude and scale. And yeah, we would just want to bring people along with us and show them what it's like, I guess.
So it's quite an intensive route. What are going to be the highlights of the journey?
So I think some challenges and highlights are kind of there. So at the moment, we're doing all of the logistics for the planning. So the things that stick out are obviously the slightly tricky bits, but I think that's where we'll have some fun adventures as well. So obviously, goes without saying, we're going from Cornwall to Kazakhstan. So that requires us going through Europe and Eastern Europe. But then after that, we are heading into Georgia, where unfortunately, the land border with Azerbaijan is currently closed. So we have ended up needing to ship the car over land from Georgia to Azerbaijan and then flying to essentially catch up with it. And then at that point, we need to get a cargo ferry, not a passenger ferry, but a cargo ferry over from Baku into Aktau in Kazakhstan. And then once we are there, we are going to take a little detour and travel down through Uzbekistan, Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan, basically to see the Pamir Highway. It's the M41, and it's basically traces where parts of the Silk Route were. So through the mountains, you can see then like 3,000-year-old Silk Road cities. And I think that's going to be an absolutely epic portion of the trip before we go back up into Kazakhstan to the finish point up in like the top western corner.
So you've had to arrange for some leave, I guess, from your employers. How easy has that been? And you want to give the guys a shout out that have helped you along with that?
Yeah, so myself and Joe will be using pretty much all our annual leave all at once, plus a few extra days of kind of time we had to make up. And yeah, my Studio A side, they were kind enough to give me this opportunity to get out there and go do what I wanted to do, knowing that I can kind of come back and continue working with them.
And then Joe has managed to wangle a fair amount of time off from Rick Steins as well. So a massive thanks to them for giving us Joe for 6 weeks, basically. Matt and I are both self-employed, so it is slightly easier for us, but definitely recognise that it wouldn't be possible in the same way without those companies being so flexible.
So just remind us the dates that you're setting off and when you hope to be back.
So the date we're setting off, we're hoping to set off on the 6th of July from Land's End, 6th or 7th, I think. And then the trip itself will last about 6 or 7 weeks we're aiming for the two finish line parties. One's on the 16th of August, and the one after that is the 24th, I think, of August. But we're aiming to finish on the 16th, all being well.
And how can we follow your expedition?
You can follow us at Karen to Kazakhstan on Instagram.
You can also find a link to our GoFundMe there in our bio. And just while we're on it, huge thank you to all of the 47 people who've donated. We've raised 1,675 for our charities so far. So that's like just over halfway of our goal for 3K, and we haven't even left yet, so that's great news. And also just to say that if there are any local businesses listening who might want to get involved, then we are 100% open to that as well, so please get in touch.
So we can follow you online, and good luck on the journey. It's going to be amazing, and I can't wait to see the film when it goes out as well. So for now, that's Kieran, Matt and Joe. Have a good time, enjoy yourselves, and thank you so much for raising money for the charities.
A space to speak your mind with Cornwall Mind.
So thanks once again to the guys for joining us on the show, and we look forward to following your journey. Well, that's it for today's programme.
If you missed anything, you can download the podcast on Apple, Spotify and Amazon Podcast.
And don't forget to like and subscribe to hear the new episode when it comes out, or you can listen back to any of our previous programmes.
For support and more information for better mental health, visit cornwallmind.org or call the Mind helpline during office hours.
And that's on 0300 123 3393.
Or call the NHS Crisis Hotline on 111 and then press the option 2.
And this gives you another way to get urgent help if you're struggling with your mental health.
And you can call the Samaritans anytime for free on 116 123.
If you'd like to be part of the show, you can get in contact. You can email aspacetospeakyourmind@gmail.com.
And you can find out more about the show if you follow Cornwall Mind on Facebook or Instagram, or on their website cornwallmind.org.
So thanks again for listening to the show. It's been Richard and Gaelle this month, and we hope you'll join us next time here on A Space to Speak Your Mind.
A space to speak your mind with Cornwall Mind.